So we were actually wrong in the last video. We totally forgot about the humiliation of China. We had the orders mixed up. So first,
I'm also tired of writing, so we're gonna do like a podcast style.
Yeah. I forgot. Yeah. So we're gonna be just talking instead of writing.
Yep. Straight to you.
Yep. So
us to the people.
That's right. So we're gonna be talking about the humiliation of China, and that's gonna connect us to the Japanese and imperialism in Southeast Asia.
Yep.
So this is often called the 100 Years of Humiliation, and it's all about the fall of the, how do you say it?
The Qing dynasty?
Yes, the Qing dynasty.
Qing.
Okay, Qing. Okay. So for over 250 years, China was ruled by the Qing dynasty, they were also known as the Manchu dynasty. Mm-hmm. But by the 1800s, things started to fall apart. Mainly due to internal problems.
Okay.
So, a lot of internal problems. There was corruption in the government. There was peasant revolt. The people were sort of tired of what was going on. And they had a very, very outdated government. Honestly, we know how old China is based on our studies of it last year. And it's never really changed its style.
Yes, but the thing is that they didn't do that because they were ignorant. But they used to be the top dog. They used to be like a really world power.
They were advanced at the time.
And they were advanced. And then when they fell, not only did they fall, but they were also oblivious to the fact that they were falling. And again, it's the same with China and Japan. And you get what? You're not following?
No, I'm fine. I don't think they fell. I feel like the others rose above, and they just couldn't keep up.
Okay. It's relative.
Yeah. All right, continue.
Well, no, you messed up the flow. So they also had increasing pressure from European imperialists.
Which is an external problem
yes,
rather than
it's
internal.
an external problem. So both these factors led to kind of the downfall, but it starts with an external factor in the Opium War. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the Opium War is where, I remember this, wow. So Britain, they sold opium to China, which led to huge addictions because opium is a drug, a very addictive drug, and it led to a lot of social chaos. And China tried to stop this trade, and Britain was like, you know what, like, make me, perfect. And war was waged between Britain and China, and Britain won very, very easily.
But like not even close. We read a document. I read this document, and it was a primary account from a Chinese dude looking at the British ships, like, oh my God, it's so big, it's so this, it's so that, and it really shows how oblivious that they were to the outside world, because again, China and Japan, they had a closed door policy coming in.
They were isolated. They thought that that's how they were gonna be better than everyone else, and they still thought they were better than everyone else because they had no idea what was going on. They had no idea of the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. So now Britain was like, yeah, we just beat the heck out of you guys, and it sort of exposed China, and it showed that they were outdated and weak. So now the Treaty of Nanjing was made, which was the first of many unequal treaties that China was forced into. So the Treaty of Nanjing, it forced China to pay for all of the money that Britain spent in that war. It made them give up Hong Kong, which Britain controlled up until 1999, I believe. And it sort of shows how imperialism even lasted into like our time. And it allowed extraterritoriality. Did I say it right? It's basically when British citizens go to China, they are not subject to Chinese law; they're subject to British law.
Yeah.
And that's honestly not fair because obviously each place is gonna have different laws, but they sort of struck that.
I also think the most important thing was the fact they gave up Hong Kong, because it's like the people. It's not about the people. It's that now China is opened up to trade. And now they're basically able to get bullied by different countries, which we'll see right now.
So China, they were losing control of their very own empire.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit more humiliation. After the Opium War, the foreign powers now all saw what was going on. So they all started to exploit China. The US, Britain, France, Russia, Japan. They all carved out what Mr. Mulvaney called them spheres of influence.
That is a form of imperialism.
Yeah.
It's when you kind of it's through trade. It's economic. It's where you trade with this, and then you gain influence. And it's used in China. It's used in a lot of other like smaller countries, like in Africa. It was created in the Middle East. In the Middle East, actually, a lot. It was created.
Yeah, it was a lot of student interest.
Yeah.
They controlled the trade in those areas and the resources.
Mm-hmm.
So China, they tried to respond and tried to fight back, but honestly, they weren't very successful. We have the Taiping Rebellion, which
this was also internal, and the external caused the internal, and the internal causes the external. It's kind of like it all just multiplies of what will be.
Yeah. So the Taiping Rebellion was a civil war, as Matthew just said. It was internal, and it led to just millions of people dying.
And no improvements being made. That's the big thing. I mean, and this also, if we talk about the boxer
yeah, we'll get to that. Wait. Just so you know, the Taiping Rebellion, it didn't really start due to a specific thing. It was just due to everything that was falling apart.
It's because the people didn't like other nations being in their country, and that happens a lot.
And the government wasn't doing anything about it.
That's nationalism. And it's not the government chose not to, the government wasn't able to do anything about it. But the people thought that, no, we need a change, so they formed the Taiping Rebellion, and that didn't really work.
So, what were you saying, the Boxer Rebellion?
The self-strengthening movement was a failed attempt to modernize China's military and industry. That's because they weren't perfectly on board, like with the Japanese thing. What's the Japanese big modernization thing? What do they call that? They called that something.
I know.
It was like
the Meiji Restoration.
The Meiji Restoration. Yeah, they weren't completely on board because they still wanted to save some of their qualities, and Japan did that very well, but China wasn't able to do that very well. And then the Boxer Rebellion was a nationalist uprising. This was much more radical, but there weren't as many radicals, and this was crushed. And again, these internal things caused the external powers to be like, no, you can't do that. Now we get to take more of your stuff because you guys are being bad.
So then there was a pretty significant war, the Sino-Japanese War, where Japan they were like, okay, wait. They always thought China was strong.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll make the parallel next video.
Yeah.
So Japan was like, oh wow, even our neighbor China, we thought they were strong. No, they're not. So they went in, they took Taiwan, and it sort of showed how China was even being bullied by their neighbors, by people all over the world. Even Japan, who was on the same boat as them with these closed door policies. So to avoid being colonized completely, the U.S., the one thing they did not want was an empire being started because, as we know, the U.S. is the powerhouse of the world, and what they fear most is someone challenging that.
Yeah.
So what they did to take caution is that they proposed the open door policy, which allowed equal trade and it allowed access to China from all powers. See, the very significant thing is China didn't agree to this. They were forced into it. And China was they called it the carving of the Chinese melon, because while technically they weren't colonizing them, they were still making out their spheres of influence, and it was essentially the same thing.
You think about influence, and that China had no influence in their own fate. That happened in Africa. That happened in the Middle East. Especially if you get documents like that on the test, it's good to make that parallel.
So by the year 1911, just a reminder of when this started. It started in the 1800s. By 1911, it was in the late 1800s. So now we're into the early 1900s. The Qing dynasty was collapsing, and the last emperor, I bet all of you remember him, the last emperor of China, Puyi, who was just a little gooner kid.
Yeah, little child.
And you talk.
All right. And the new leader was Sun Yat-sen, known as the father of modern China. If you remember, he will be a deciding factor in the world war soon to come. He founded the Kuomintang Party and laid out his vision for China through the three principles of the people: nationalism, democracy, and livelihood. Nationalism, to remove foreign influence; democracy, to create a representative government; and livelihood, to improve people's economic conditions. But building a new China, it wouldn't be easy, and many power struggles followed, especially when the military leader Yuan Shikai, who briefly ruled the new republic, would plunge China into civil war, with competing factions fighting for control. Puyi.
Puyi.
And again, this is, and that turmoil will kind of plunge them into the communist.
So I honestly was not paying attention. I was looking up Puyi, but just to go over it, just so I know. So new leader Sun Yat-sen, father of modern China, laid out his vision for China through 3 principles: nationalism, democracy, livelihood, power struggle. Okay, Yan Shikai, what happened? Oh, he ruled the new republic.
No, we don't even put Civil War.
Yeah, China goes into civil war.
They never really bounced back until like 10 years ago, to be honest.
So to review, the Qing dynasty, they declined due to their internal and external problems. Events like the Opium Wars, Boxer Rebellion, and spheres of influence sort of exposed China's vulnerability, and eventually the dynasty ended, leading to an attempt to build a modern republic, which was so successful.
Well, and also because of that was nationalism. Nationalism was one of his principles, but it didn't work because I remember he thought of the people, the Chinese people, as loose sand. They were loyal to their own. They were loyal to their own families, their own, kind of things that they do, but they weren't loyal to the government, which was, and we'll talk about this with Japan, is that how Japan was able to overcome that is because they elevated their leader. Their leader, instead of is this political figure, he's now this religious figure. He's elevated. He's like kind of like a god in a sense. And they're like, oh no, I'm doing this for like the god. I'm doing this for the god. I'm doing this for the god. So we're talking about that right now.
In our next video, Japan and Southeast imperialism, Southeast Asia.